Skyrim is one of those games that has a lot of options available to the player. There's not one move set or play style that you're really restricted to. At least not in a hard sense. Like Legend of Zelda, you're always going to have a sword to, stab stuff with. Mario, you're always going to be jumping or punching or kicking or whatever. Metroid, you're always going to be shooting. But Skyrim has, along with all of the Elder Scrolls games, have a bunch of different variable playstyles. You could be a sword and board, you could be a two-handed barbarian, you could be a spell slinger, you could be a gish, you could be a rogue, you could be an assassin. There's so many ways to play the game. But it's generally agreed that the worst way to play the game is as a pure magician. And that is to say, only using magic skills, which are destruction, restoration, conjuration, illusion, alteration, and enchanting. Enchanting is kind of the oddball out, I guess, because every build loves enchanting, because enchanting is just so powerful and it does so much for the player. But, so the 5 schools of magic, and that's magic that you can cast, And don't get me wrong, as there are some of them that are useful across all playstyles. Like if you're a Gish, let's say that you're a sword and board, light armor, red guard warrior, and you say, well, I'm wearing this light armor so I get increased stamina regen, and I move faster, and I make less noise, but it doesn't offer as much protection. Well, just pop on a stone flesh or ebony flesh spell from the alteration school, and suddenly you've got the armor rating of a heavy armored barbarian, Or it's, I'm just not doing enough damage, and I don't really have the blocking capabilities to stay alive because I am using a two-handed weapon. We'll pop on a flame cloak spell, and suddenly you're doing tons more damage just by being in melee range. Or just general things like, I could use another hand in this fight. Conjure a little guy. I can't see in this cave. Cast a candlelight spell. This guy is difficult to beat. Paralyze. There's so many ways that magic can help you. But note that I say help. You don't want to just only use magic, because magic in Skyrim is weak. And it's not saying, again, I'm not saying it's useless, but it's just weak. With weapons and armor, you can forge them, you can create them yourself, you can improve them at grindstones and workbenches. And, in previous Elder Scrolls games, you used to be able to make your own spells, too. And if spellcraft was in Skyrim, I think magic would be just that much more viable. But it isn't. By the time you're level 20 or something, you've probably got armor that you've made yourself, you've improved pretty well, you've got big hulking weapons that you're carrying around, but you're still stuck with the firebolt spell, which deals 25 damage. And then you've got your bow, which deals, 40 damage from a normal shot, and 120 damage on a sneak attack. And you're thinking, well, why would I use magic? It takes longer, it costs magicka to cast, and at the end of the day, I can do that same amount of damage quicker and more efficaciously with any melee weapon or any ranged weapon, just not magic. And again, there is a use for destruction, even for a Gish, even for a barbarian. There's still ways to use it. There are enemies that are always going to be weaker to magic, like frost trolls, sometimes even dragons. If you want to make a dragon not be able to use their breath attack, just use sparks on it. I've done that myself. It's not the strongest spell, but it has utility. Same for restoration. You could drink potions, or you could heal yourself with restoration, which generally heals a lot more than a potion and isn't a limited resource. Conjuration, like I said, is always useful just to have an extra pair of hands in the fight. Alteration is like the catch-all school of magic, you know. Every single playstyle can benefit from alteration spells, and I really appreciate that. But there's one school of magic that is completely useless, in my opinion. Well, near completely useless, and that's the illusion school of magic. So the illusion school of magic mostly focuses on, you know, manipulating the minds of your opponents into, you know, performing actions on the battlefield. And so there's 4 main types of illusion spells. That is the fear spells, the fury spells, the calm spells, and the courage spells. And there's a few oddballs, you know, thrown in there, you know, but we'll discuss those later. So what do they do? So, of those 4 main types, so courage spells, what they do is you can cast them on creatures, enemies, allies, but they're mostly useful on allies to increase their combat abilities, essentially. Give them more health, you know, give them increased vigor to fight, you know, they won't run away from battle. You know, it's sometimes even useful on an enemy. You know, say, well, if, like, let's say a bandit is running away, try to get away. If you cast courage on them, then they suddenly won't run away anymore. Sure, they'll have increased health and stuff, but at least they won't run away, because when enemies run away, it can be really annoying. A fun little tip is to cast it on wildlife, so that they just stand there, and, you know, then you can just go up and stab them. So, of the 4, I would say courage spells are definitely the most useful. But like I said, they're only really useful against enemies that flee and your allies. And most of the time you don't have a lot of allies. So, and what's the point of, you know, going up, taking the time to go into your magic inventory, select courage, you know, aim the spell at your follower, shoot it, you know, and suddenly they're a tiny bit better at fighting? It might not be worth it, you know, when you can just take your sword, stab, and the enemy's dead. But, you know, what about the other 3? Okay, so the 3, fear is the next type. So fear spells do pretty much the opposite of courage. They make the enemy run away in terror. You know? And that sounds like it could be useful. You know, if you're fighting too many people at once, you say, I need to get this guy off my back, so you cast fear on him, and he runs away and hides until the effect wears off. But by the time the effect wears off, you've already dealt with this guy, and now it's a one-on-one again. You know, and that sounds really useful. And it could be, but I'll explain later. But just know that fear is just kind of annoying. I mean, it's annoying in the first place for an enemy to run away from you, but it doesn't work a lot of the time. Let's see. Fury spells. Fury spells, again, pretty much do the opposite of that. Instead of making an enemy run away and hide, they make an enemy enraged, and basically make it so they attack everybody, not just you, but also their allies, wildlife, pretty much anything that they can see, they're going to attack. And it has the exact same general problem as all illusion spells, but I will explain that in a bit. Fury has utility, you know. Again, with the wildlife example, or an enemy running away, you know, cast Fury on them, and suddenly they're, you know, come running to you. Sorry, my nose is itching. Anyways, but, you know, I mean, if you're gonna cast any spell on an enemy to make them stop running away, would you rather cast the spell that makes them stop fighting you, or the spell that makes them fight you? I don't know. Fury is also useful if you're trying to do an assassin build. If you can cast the spell at the enemy and it hits them, then they'll start attacking you. And not only will you be able to attack them and kill them without a bounty, but also all NPCs around you will help fight them because they'll be targeted onto them as well. Yep. So Fury, pretty useful. I would say Fury is honestly either the second or third most useful spell. Courage is first, like I said. And last but not least is Calm. Calm, again, pretty much does the opposite of what Fury does. Instead of making them attack everybody, it makes them attack nobody. You know, essentially casts Calm on an opponent and they are completely out of the fight. You know, they won't attack you, people won't attack them. You know, and there's sometimes even special dialogue for that. Like, for example, in Boethiah's Daedric quest line, you know, you can cast Calm on the previous champion of Boethia, and you can actually unlock dialogue that you can't get otherwise. Yep. And I think that's a great detail, but, you know, who's to say? But Calm, exact same scenarios. Enemy fleeing from you, wildlife, you know, trying to get away from you, too many enemies attacking you, an NPC you don't want to fight at the moment, just cast Calm on them, and, you know, all your problems are solved. But then there comes the one big problem with illusion spells, is that they are all level capped. You know, in the text of every illusion spell, pretty much, it says, works on enemies up to blank level. And, you know, that doesn't seem so bad, you know? You know, the more powerful illusion spells can work on enemies up to, say, level 29, and that's great. I mean, that's amazing. But that's the thing. So, remember, this is Skyrim, not Oblivion or Morrowind, where you want to control your leveling to get all the right attributes and skill level ups. I mean, Skyrim is a game where you can just level up willy-nilly. You know, you can get to level 80, and the game is still about the same level of difficulty as long as you're getting better gear and better weapons, which aren't hard to find or make because of smithing. You know? And there's another thing that makes you want to level up quickly, and that is perk points. You know, the brand new thing in Skyrim. Basically, every time you level up, you get a perk point. And on all 18 skills have their own perk trees, like Destruction, Smithing, Enchanting, Restoration, One-Handed, Two-Handed. All of them have their own little skill tree. And those perk points can be used to purchase permanent upgrades for those skills that just make the game more fun, more diverse, more exciting. Skyrim without perk points is just a worse game. And if you don't level up, you don't get perk points, therefore, a worse game. And that kind of leads me to the point I wanted to make this whole video, is that illusion and the way all of its spells are level capped make me think that magic is meant to be used for a low level character. Now, what I mean by that is not magic is only useful at lower levels. And it's not. Like, it's useful at all levels. But it is the most useful at low levels, specifically level 1. You know, think about it. At level 1, since enemies scale with your level, if you're level 1, most of the enemies are also level 1, or 2, or 5, or whatever. But at those levels, illusion spells will almost always work on them. You know, you can calm any enemy, you can fury any enemy. You can really do whatever with those spells. You know, destruction spells only doing 6 damage per second. Well, that's fine if all enemies only have 50 health, you know? Like, oh, this healing spell only heals 35 points. Well, I've only got 100 health, so why not? That's amazing, you know? Oh, I can conjure this familiar that deals, 3 damage and has 20 health? well, I've only got 100 health and I only deal 5 damage. It's pretty much a second me, you know? I don't know. But it's just that the more you level up, the more obsolete magic becomes in favor of weapon combat. And nowhere is that more evident than the illusion school, because by the time you're level 30, pretty much none of your illusion spells work anymore. And like I said, there are the oddball spells sprinkled in there. Like there's Muffle, which makes you move silently. There's Invisibility, which turns you invisible. You know, and those are both great for stealth scenarios. You know, there's Vision of the 10th Eye, which you can only get after you get your illusion to 100. So, you know, but which gives you night vision, which, you know, just another way to make Khajiits, you know, completely useless. But, you know, if you've got the Anniversary Edition, you've got Orm's Aquatic Escape and Fenric's Welcome, which are, I've never actually used them. But, you know, they could be sort of useful, but point is, the 4 main types of illusion spells are just, once you hit level 30, they don't work anymore, except on low-level enemies. And if you're level 30 and you're fighting a low-level enemy, your first thought isn't, oh, haha, this is the perfect time to use my illusion spells, and I'll defeat them with the power of my mind-bending magic. Your first thought is, I've got a sword, I stab them, and they die. And that's it. And you just think, why would I use these spells? Because they don't work. Why risk? Because you can't see an enemy's level. You know, I know there are mods out there that let you see an enemy's level, and if you could see an enemy's level, you could say, oh, I'll use my illusion spells. But as it stands, you're taking a gamble every time. And at a certain point, you start thinking, why take the gamble if, you know, it hardly ever works, and when it works, I basically get nothing for it. And all of those problems are alleviated by staying at level 1 or level 5 or anything like that. You know, and magic does improve as you level up. You know, your skill, that is. You know, for one-handed, two-handed archery, you know, the higher your skill level, the more damage you do with those weapons. For light armor and heavy armor, the higher your skill level is, the higher your armor rating is. And for magic schools, the higher your magic skill level is, the less magic it costs to cast those spells. And that's important, because with all the others, they objectively make those skills better to use. You know, you get a better armor rating, you immediately get a better weapon damage. But with magic, it just becomes easier to cast them. You know, they don't level up with you. And so if you're doing a pure mage build, you want to stick to the very low levels when magic is the most proportionately powerful. But then you forego all perk points, so you can't actually pick anything that improves your magic, and so your magic doesn't get any better, and so you're just this stagnant, unchanging character who casts the same spells over and over. And that doesn't even work, because once you get your magic skill levels high enough for you to purchase more powerful spells, you don't have the proper magicka to cast them. And so you're just asking, I'm making myself weaker so that my spells can be stronger, but my spells don't get stronger because I'm weaker. And so you're just going around and around, and eventually you just give up and say, I'm done, I just want to use a bow or a sword or a shield, you know, because it's just, why would I make the game less fun for myself for the sake of using something that is objectively less useful? It just doesn't make sense. But, you know, that's enough negativity. Where are illusion spells useful? Like I said, so, kind of funnily, the most useful illusion spells are the ones that don't fall into those main 4 categories. You know, like muffle and invisibility. If you're doing the Thieves Guild or Dark Brotherhood quest lines, or even just normal quests, it's useful to pop muffle, pop invisibility, and you just sneak by and almost nothing can detect you unless you bump into somebody or knock something over. You know, they're good for stealth builds, you know, assassin builds, really anything. You know, they're just great. And, you know, muffle is also one of the best ways to power level your illusion. You know, and just another reason why illusion is what I think is the worst magic school in Skyrim is that, you know, all other magic schools, you have to get to skill level 90 to unlock the master level, you know, master level ritual spells, right? For illusion, you have to get to 100 because of a bug in the code. And so you have to spend even longer with the least useful spells in the game, casting them over and over in the hopes they'll work, in order to get even more useless spells. You know. But recently, when I was playing Skyrim, there was one scenario that I discovered that illusion spells were really powerful in, and that is the Civil War quest line. That's right. If you take the worst, you know, skill in the game, you take the worst quest line in the game, and you put them together, you get something that's actually kind of good. You know, I think it was, I was, you know, in the Imperial Legion, I had just snuck into Fort Kostov, I had freed the Imperial prisoners, and we had gotten our weapons, busted out, and we let the other Imperials into the place. And I thought, and I just recently completed the Illusion Ritual quest, and I thought to myself, you know what, why don't I cast, you know, Call to Arms on these guys? And that is the master level courage spell. So I got in the middle of everybody, you know, casted the spell, boom, and my guys just demolished the enemies. Like, I barely even had time to do anything because they just cut through the Stormcloaks one by one. And you know what? Death to the Stormcloaks, that's right. Imperial Legion all the way. But anyways, and it just opened my eyes that was the first time I had ever used a master level illusion spell and felt good about it. Like, every other time I tried to use them, I was just like, oh, it's just like all the other illusion spells, it doesn't work. And also, bear in mind, I was level 94 at this point, which really shows how much effort I was putting into the Civil War quest line. But even at level 94, like, I could still cast Call to Arms and just watch my team shred through the enemy. And that felt amazing, you know? And it was really what made me make this video. Made me want to talk about illusion and how much better it could have been. Because imagine this. I know it's a little unfair to give illusion the special treatment, but it deserves it, you know? You know, in the absence of spell making, where you can make a more powerful illusion spell, you know, for more magicka, whatever. What if instead of, you know, when the skill level went up, the magicka cost went down? What if when the skill level went up, the level cap went up? Or better yet, just remove the level cap and make it a percentage-based system. Like, let's say, you know, the novice level Fury spell. And you say, okay, this Fury spell always works on targets up to level 5. If a target is level 6, then it has maybe a 90% chance to work. If they're level 7, it has a 75% chance to work. If they're level 8, it has a 50% chance to work. Level 9, 20%, level 10, 10%, and on and on. But as the skill level goes up, then also that, you know, cast chance increases. Let's say you get your illusion to level 20, and now it always works on targets level 8 and lower. And once you get it to level 100, it always works on targets level 50 or lower. And, you know, maybe that's too powerful. Maybe that's not what the world needed, but I don't know. I wish illusion was better, because when I popped off Call to Arms and the Imperial Legion became this hurricane of death, that was one of the most cathartic feelings I've ever had in Skyrim. And I want that to happen more. But the fact is, it just doesn't, and it just can't in the way Skyrim currently is. And I am sure there is a mod to do that, like Better Illusion, it's probably called. I'll find it there in the Lover's Lab, because I love Illusion, god damn it. But, and I guess just to finish off the video, I'll talk about the Illusion skill tree. I mentioned perk points and how they can unlock permanent upgrades. The Illusion skill tree is also probably the worst skill tree in the game. Because almost every upgrade you can get is, Illusion spells now work on higher level animals. Illusion spells now work on higher level people. Illusion spells now work on undead automatons. And they've always got the obligatory magic dual casting. They've always got, novice spells cost half to cast. All the way up to master. And there is one, illusion perk that I always get, and I have to waste perk points on the illusion tree to get it, but it's quiet casting, which makes it so that all spells from all schools of magic are now silent. And that's amazing for all stealth modes. If I want to kill an NPC or paralyze them and pickpocket the gold I got from trading off of them, or I want to, really do anything. If I'm trying to hide during the Thieves Guild quest line, quiet casting is essential. And, it's useful for every player that uses magic. And I know magic and stealth don't really go together, but listen, if you're hiding in a corner from some bandits invisible and you need to recast invisibility, you don't want them to hear it. And I really wish more of the illusion skill tree perks were like that. I wish there was more like quiet casting, because personally I just think that's it's thematically amazing. Of course an illusion master would know how to mask their spells, I just think it should be more like that and less like, fury spells are now better, fear spells are now better, courage spells are now better. Like, boring. But I don't know. I guess I'll close off the video by saying illusion could have been so much better in Skyrim. And so could magic. But as it stands, unless you're willing to handicap yourself and just shoot yourself in the foot and play the whole game at level 1, magic is always going to be inferior to nearly every other option in the game. And who knows, maybe one day I'll do a Skyrim player through where I stay at level 1 the whole time and just purely use magic. Just to put myself through hell, But the way it is, I'm going to keep going full on Gish, swords in one hand, spells in the other, and I'm going to enjoy myself. But I would enjoy myself a hell of a lot more if illusion didn't suck.